What is up, ladies and gentlemen of YouTube? Welcome to another Budget Monk 119 video. Here I'm actually going to be showing off my game of Austria, and the reason that I've been playing Austria myself is because a lot of people have been talking about how badly Austria has been nerfed, and the main nerf, if you're not aware, is that the amount of troops and manpower that Austria begins with in the beginning of the game are basically sort of representative of Austria's might without being the emperor, without those additions to manpower and force limit. In other words, he begins with about 19 or less, I think actually, 1,000 troops instead of 40 plus thousand. With that being said, I wanted to see. It actually took me 2 attempts, and we're sitting here in the timeline. Don't worry, I'm not even up to the year 1500. But I want to slow roll this here because this game's pretty good in my opinion. I wanted to see if I could pull off all of the basic fundamentals as Austria, which of course, the things that are really almost guaranteed are obtaining the union over Bohemia and the union over Hungary. Secondly, I was determined to play a few games here through the beginning of the game, get a good game going. Like I said, it did take 2 to actually obtain the Burgundian inheritance. And lastly, I was wondering if I could also reign in Italy. Now, that was actually not a priority for me, as you'll see here in a moment with my starting moves, because reigning in Italy is a funny one, because it does increase the value of the sort of inheriting the empire dramatically with the amount of land here and development in Italy. With that being said, however, although it does increase the value of the empire dramatically, it actually makes being the emperor more difficult, ironically enough, because if Italy falls out of the empire and you expand into Italy, these are a lot of provinces that you can add back, resulting in imperial authority. So again, to reiterate, it kind of makes the value much higher, but makes it more difficult, whereas if you lose it, it's actually, you have an easier time being the emperor from my experience. So with that being said, we're going to get straight into this, and just keep in mind that a lot of the diplomatic stuff here is not actually represented, and I'm going to show you the state of the game once we finish this timeline. Notice that I am fighting the Ottomans here, spoiler alert. I've got a victory over him, so that's very exciting, but I'm really looking forward to continuing this game as well to show you guys that Austria is still the alpha of Europe, in my opinion. So if we go in here, the first move that I made was personal union Bohemia, pretty self-explanatory. He actually was allied to like 2 one-province minors, which I managed to separate peace, and kind of slow roll him here as I was building up more troops to try to, as I gained more manpower, to match my force limits and overpower him. My second move was going in against Venice. Now notice that I actually took Istria. It is part of my initial starting state, and again, stressing on the fact that I wasn't too concerned excuse me, about forming or reigning in Italy, rather. Now, I did ally Hungary, and the reason that I allied Hungary is because I find when you ally him that it gives him less odds of having strong diplomacy. For example, if you do not ally him, very often he will just grab France as an ally, and that feels bad, man. What I find is that if you actually ally him and then break your alliance within 5 years because of the truce to where his heir will come of age, then you can go in against him, and more often than not, he actually has worse diplomacy than he would have had otherwise. Same approach I took here with the Pope, as of course France is rivaling me and vice versa. I allied the Pope, again, not sure if I wanted to reign in Italy or not, but in order to reduce the odds of him allying France. Now, I did call in Hungary and I promised him land against Venice, which we actually have done here, of course, and I intend to gobble that up for free, in quotations, after I personal union him, so he did the work there. First move into Bohemia, second move into Venice. Now, I'm chilling here with a little bit of aggressive expansion, and what has actually happened is the Ottomans. You can see Ottomans have Corfu here and Naxos. The Ottomans actually attacked Venice as well when I was attacking him, which really resulted in him being absolutely wrecked, and Milan declared a war over his core, promising Ferraria some land. I'm 100% sure that I'm pronouncing that wrong. I apologize for that. But as you can see here, he did take this province. At this stage, he was actually rivaled by the Pope and became excommunicated, which made it that much more easy for me to go in here with a separate truce, and resulting in less aggressive expansion. I was able to take that province. I was feeling pretty good about that, taking that province for less aggressive expansion, and I did release another member of the Empire here, and I was really warming up to the idea of reigning in Italy at this point. I broke my alliance with Hungary and the Pope, and naturally around this time I had PU'd Hungary. So keep in mind that the first war was a little bit rough. Second war was very easy because he was collapsed upon. Third war was very easy. Fourth war against Hungary was the hardest, I suppose, in terms of size and scale. He was allied to the Teutonic Order. But the fact is that I overwhelmed him, and he's got no fort on his capital, which of course is the war goal. I managed to take that and basically siege everything else down that was not fortified, and after winning a few battles, demoralizing him, we grabbed that personal union. Now I immediately used his claim on Bosnia to take this province and unify this Croatian area, and I've also made the remaining remaining Serbian province high priority in the hopes that Hungary can actually claim that for me. Now I believe I go into the Pope next, and at this point my aggressive expansion is quite high. Unfortunately, I am stationing my diplomats in electors as well as generally in Italians. I was really excited about this, guys. Provence did not join the Empire, but Savoy was expanding outside of the Empire, and I was pretty determined. He also added the provinces, which is really nice. Really determined to reign in Italy at this point. You can also see that Burgundy is having a lot of success, which is also exciting, going to result in that much more of a Burgundian inheritance if I'm able to claim that. So I believe my next move was actually going into Venice there, and there has been a few wars between England and Burgundy. You can see that England actually gained a province in a defensive war against Burgundy. However, another war broke out. So at this point I have this region, and I'm waiting on my truce with the Pope to reign in Italy. Aggressive expansion is very high. I thought this was a good opportunity to go in against Burgundy and fight a long war against him. And I did end up getting the call for peace with your increased diplo costs. War exhaustion increase rather, and I was stressing out. However, this time around I did get it, which is absolutely beautiful. Loving that, and I decided to state up some of this territory, delete some of the forts, and like I said, I did get an additional landmass here with Lorraine, for example. It's very upsetting sometimes. He takes one province from Lorraine, and although it will do the job at unifying this area, if Lorraine still exists, he will actually, you get an event where he requests it, and if you deny giving it to him, you will lose 10 imperial authority. But if the nation does not exist whatsoever, then you're golden there in terms of inheritance. So Austria looking pretty mighty here, and if we continue on, I don't believe, as far as we can see, I do much more than that. I obviously take this area of Italy, and then returning Roma back via the event, reigning in Italy at this point, and you can see Savoy has expanded even more, adding provinces to the empire. So the only province which is the only core that needs to be reclaimed is from Denmark, and I do actually fight a war with him. However, it might not be that visible. I also went in against Serbia and vassalized Serbia, hoping to utilize that reconquest. So although I am fighting a long war with Denmark, you might wonder why is nothing visible changing there. I believe that's everything else I do. No, I'm wrong. England actually ended up rivaling me, which I was pretty upset about because he was friendly and I did want to utilize him against France. What I ended up doing, however, he was getting attacked by France. I attacked him myself over this province, which is part of the area that I obtained. It's also part of the English Channel. And once I did that, he actually became an invalid rival, resulting in power projection for me. And yeah, he's invalid, so I'm actually able to befriend him again. Now you'll notice here that it says Austria up here and Austria in southern Germany, and that is because the new capital of the empire is actually Antwerp over here in Antdorf. And I believe that's all we do in the meantime. So if we go exit this timeline, ta-da! I'm absolutely smashing the Ottomans with, of course, my Reconquest CB over the Serbians. And this is obviously in real time. He had two strong allies. I mean, North Africa is basically unified over Tunis and Morocco at this point. But look at that diplomacy, guys. Look at how many nations I've effectively called into war against him. And I did it. You can see here that he's got some call here in his second war against the Mamelukes, which it turned out to be quite easy for him, but at least his troops were distracted, and also the Mamelukes navy did have an impact in allowing me to get across the strait here. But I am ready to go ahead and piece this guy out. So I fought a long, hard war after building my forces up very high, and also I have a good ruler, good military in my ruler, thank goodness. Able to allow me to catch up in tech as Austria begins with a bad military ruler. We're all on the same tech level, as you can see, very far ahead in military tech, so there's no likelihood that he would tech up to 9 at this point, and I called us all in. So I'm going to go ahead and piece this guy out. Now you can see that unfortunately Poland desires these provinces, and he's not giving me the occupation. So what I decided is I'm going to go ahead and feed Serbia here. That's the plan, of course, utilizing that Reconquest CB. But I want to replace Serbia with another province, another subject. So, for example, Bulgaria or Byzantium. Now, the thing about Byzantium, guys, is that this core on his capital is going to disappear in 2 years. So you might think that the smart move would be to take the core and then take a province to release Byzantium. Well, of course, we wouldn't be able to obtain this in 2 years. So you might think, okay, I want to take the capital. Well, unfortunately, due to this decision that the Ottomans get to change the culture here, you cannot release a nation from a not completely different cultural group. So, for example, I could release Byzantium from a Trebizond, a Pontic province if he had core there, or of course a Greek province, but you cannot do it from a Turkish province. You cannot release him. He will not be an available option. So it's pretty sad that the solution is actually going to be to take 2 provinces, one being Greek, allowing us to release him, the other being the capital so that we don't lose the core. Now I am taking this province because it's the lowest development, and it's going to give us the maximum value in doing a reconquest. So this is actually my piece against the Ottomans, feeling really good about that, and I'm also going to be taking some cash because I'm very poor myself. Well, I'm not poor, it's just that my forces are so high and so on, and I believe that I have a very expensive advisor. So feeling really good about that, guys, and you can see at this stage I'm going to go ahead and, you know what? I'll actually hold off on releasing Byzantium just for now because I have Diplo relation slot issues. But as you can see, Byzantium is available. Now, again, to reiterate, if I just took Constantinople, they would not be available to release, which is pretty sad. So let's go ahead and take my exiled troops and move back over. I want to try to avoid this province because then my troops will be stuck there. And let's take a little bit of exploration about my game right now. You can see here that Bohemia, Hungary, Serbia, and Sweden are my subjects, and that is exactly what I was doing when I was fighting Denmark. Now, I had this in mind, guys. I was thinking, if Austria is underpowered, then what is something you can do to help embolden them as an Austrian game? And I realized, guys, that Sweden begins with about 230% war score cost value of his nation. If I rush down diplomatic ideas and took this war score reduced cost combined with this, transfer subjects, half cost, you can actually 100% the Danes and vassalize Sweden, and that is exactly what I have done. Look at that. Amazing. My diplomacy is absolutely astounding. I am 1 over right now, my diplo slots, and I plan to release Byzantium. So my solution to that is actually the Poles have served their purpose, which is to push out the Ottomans from Europe or help us. And at this stage, I feel like by the time our truce comes up with the Ottomans, we're going to be more powerful against them. So, as I only have 2 valid rivals at this stage, France and the Ottomans, I'm going to go ahead and rival Poland, which is going to enable me to break my relations. So I'm now 1 over. I'm also going to go ahead and begin integrating Serbia. And then, in a timely fashion, I will be releasing Byzantium. And of course, my plan is to take the entirety of Greece back in my next war against the Ottomans. So looking really good in that regard. If we look at our tech here, I'm doing well on my points. I've taken diplomatic and I'm now working on religious. And I've got to admit, guys, this is a bloody good game. I've been quite fairly lucky because it's 1496, and the reform desire is actually not that high. So obviously I've been doing well as the empire. Look at that beautiful empire. Some nations have added provinces. I dealt with Burgundy somewhat early. Brescia was added to the empire very early, and adding these provinces before I reigned in Italy, as well as these provinces here. You can see here that I've passed 3 reforms and slowly working towards that 4th. So at this stage, unfortunately, if you disallow wars, that used to be really the winning reform. Disallowing wars would actually prevent the leagues from ever firing. However, unfortunately, they will actually be led by somebody outside the empire at this stage. So you need to go one further, which is actually the HRE is always inherited by the same country. If you make it to this before the league wars fire, then they will never fire, because you are simply the ruler of the empire. Which I'm interested to see if that could happen. Now, I could have committed much more to forming the empire than I have, as my personal strategy that I've worked in the past is to release every single nation via the return province once they are in their empire. So I would be releasing, for example, Burgundy, Bar, Luxembourg, Lorraine, Hainaut, I can't pronounce these nations, forgive me, Flanders, Brabant, Holland, Aquileia, and Urbino, all as independent nations. And of course, utilizing that strategy in the past, instead of getting the union over Hungary, I have actually annexed his land in order to release Croatia, Nitria, and resulting in the decline of Hungary, I eventually released Hungary as well, and Transylvania as well as members of the empire, pushing down into the Balkans, releasing Bosnia, Serbia, and so on. We can see here that Serbia is Catholic. However, he's only converted 1 of his provinces. He is converting more here as we integrate him, so that's pretty cool. And the empire's in fairly good shape. A lot of independent nations. Now, I am of course utilizing the Imperial ban CB against Denmark, and needless to say, guys, 100%ing him, I had an extremely long truce, but my truce comes up in 3 years, and that is going to give me enough time to utilize this transfer of subjects reduced by 50%, go in, and of course take all of Norway as well. And because of this, if we look at Norway here, we can see that he costs 115%, which means otherwise you would not be able to vassalize him. But of course, that's going to be reduced to 50% of that, which is what, like 65? But then because of our reduced war score cost, it's actually not going to be that expensive to vassalize Norway. So of course, in my next war, I plan to release Holstein as well, which is going to be another member of the empire, but also no longer have any uncored or unowned Holy Roman Empire core, and if we're lucky, Holstein will actually return this province or add this province to the empire, resulting in one imperial authority. Now my next move, of course, once our truce is up, is to go in against the Poles as well, and I'm thinking I am just completely empire-minded here. My plan is to actually take these provinces up here, which probably I have the coring range over northern Germany, which means if I get involved in a war, I can take these two provinces, and I plan to release Danzig and the Teutonic Order, and then I'm hoping, I feel like it's almost guaranteed that they will seek aid from the Empire and protection, adding their land to the Empire, and then of course I plan to feed the Teutonic Order all of this return core to him, which we will eventually inherit for free, also giving Lithuania, a compromised Livonian order, not Lithuania, the opportunity to join the Empire as well, and the opportunity to feed him back his core as well. But at this point, Poland is going to serve as some power projection, as we're kind of sandwiching him between Muscovy and myself. So I actually plan to continue on, have some fun, and show you guys some highlights. But before I do that, guys, I just wanted to talk about Castile here. You might think, but Monk, you did this in Scandinavia, good on you, but you didn't grab Naples. Well, here's the deal, guys. As you know, there is quite good odds and likelihood of this happening. A Habsburg being put on the Castilian throne. For those of you who don't know, there is increased odds that Castile will get a Habsburg dynasty heir on his throne, as it is a meantime to happen event, and all that is required is that he does not have a heir and he is royal marriage to Austria. Now, the reason that I didn't do it, guys, is because if you do take a province, take a subject, unfortunately they are your vassal, as you can see. The plus side of that is that Sweden gives us 1.5 ducats a month, very nice, and that would be the same with Naples giving us a contribution. But the downside is that Naples is actually small enough to where if he was a union, and our Diplo reputation is so high from our standard legitimacy, our Diplo ideas, our Austrian idea, right? Yes, which I have not yet unlocked, and of course the event that you get as Austria to get +1 Diplo reputation permanently, and then of course finally the Diplo reputation from the Pope. And ultimately, if I do choose to go that route, the second edition of Diplo reputation from influence ideas. With this amount of Diplo reputation, you actually have fairly good odds of integrating personal unions freely, and certainly something as small as Naples. And that is quite literally one of the only ways to truly expand your own borders, literally freely, is to inherit nations. With that being said, unfortunately, I will have relation slot issues like I do have right now, which I will need to manage, but it is my ambition, guys, to actually utilize, to actually personal union Castile whilst he still has these two unions and does not form Spain. And the reason is because of what I just stated. We are going to be very likely to inherit Naples, and I suspect quite likely to inherit Aragon as well for free when our ruler dies. And I even suspect we will have a moderate or small chance of inheriting Castile. Whereas if they were all united in like a Super Spain type of scenario, we would have no chance to inherit them. So that is why I'm going to try to obtain Castile, Aragon, and Naples if he gives me the opportunity, rather than waiting and just inheriting all of Spain, although that would be good as well. So with that being said, my next move after crushing the Ottomans is actually going to be to go in against France, and we can see here that Castile will help me out. So this is exactly what I intend to utilize Castile against the French to kind of unite my borders in this region, take over more of the English Channel, increasing our influence, and actually at that stage I'm going to break my ties with Castile the same way I just did with the Poles, to actually free up one of those Diplo slots that we're desperately going to need, but also hopefully breaking my truce in a timely fashion so that if his ruler passes away, boom, we go in and take the union over southern Italy and the Iberian Peninsula. So a pretty epic game, if I do say so myself, guys. And part of the reason that Austria has always been one of my favorite nations is because a lot of people have told me in the past that they're kind of forced to be diplomatic. And although I agree with that, it's like a first world problem. Austria is so strong diplomatically that there's no reason not to be a diplomatic powerhouse. But with that being said, being the emperor, and beginning with 10% moral of armies, if you especially have a disciplined advisor, Austria is also a military powerhouse, and that is how I like to play them. That is why I'm not fully committing to the empire, and I plan to crush France. And with their middle and sort of conveniently located country, they have the opportunity to crush the other real powerhouses and superpowers of Europe around the European region from the get-go of the game. And I'm going to be extremely satisfied if I can take a big victory over France here, gaining Champagne and transferring into the English Channel, where I already have 30% and counting. My ambitions going to the future, guys, of course, is to unite all of Europa as quickly as I can, including apparently all the way up to Scandinavia. And I plan to actually colonize from our new capital region of Antwerp. So in a way that does feel bad, man, guys, that I changed my capital. But of course now we collect in the English Channel, and that's going to allow me to inherit a lot of the institutes, for example, like global trade, I suspect, quite easily. But I do actually plan to become a colonial power as well. Very exciting stuff, guys. I love Austria. I hope you guys enjoyed this video of me just basically showing off, but also showing you what is possible with Austria, and I'm gonna add on a few additions here as I expand and go further into this game to see how things continue. Thanks for watching. Alrighty, so as you can see, I'm actually doing something a little bit different here, which is voiceover. And this video is, I can tell, already going to drag on for a long time. So I highly recommend those of you who are not interested in watching what I'm doing right now and talking for another 12 minutes or so, I highly recommend that before you click away, if you do wish to click away, skip to the end of the video, guys. Because it will be worth it if you are an EU4 nerd myself. But at the same time, I know that a lot of people are sort of desperate for content. And so I'm going to go through for about the next 10-11 minutes. This is about 4 hours worth of footage, guys, which is at literally about 40 times the speed here. So an extremely fast time lapse. But as you can see here, the next move that I wanted to make was going in against the French. And thankfully, with Castile as my ally, but also just being so powerful in my own right, I am able to defeat the French, as you can see here, and actually taking a big chunk, well, actually a fairly small chunk of land, but I did release that nation, if you can spot it, which I don't know how to pronounce, I believe is like Dauphine, and they do end up joining the empire, trying to actually seek independence or from France, I suppose, protection from France. Now, if I do remember correctly, guys, my next move was going in against Denmark once again, and I did intend, things became quite overwhelming here, because I did want to go in and steal Norway from him, as I've already explained. With that being said, what I found is a couple things happened. My dynasty was on the throne of Castile, and I have already broken my alliance with him, and with my dynasty being on the throne with Castile and him having actually no heir available, I desperately wanted to go in to personal union him, which everything moved along here very quickly, but also the Protestant Reformation actually spawned in Pomerania. So if you remember correctly, I said that I wanted to release Norway and take Norway under my control rather, and release Holstein. I ended up actually occupying Holstein and taking the province myself, which was the only province available with the Imperial Ban CB, as it is part of the Empire, simply so that I could fabricate on Pomerania. Now, I was really lucky that Pomerania's the reform the center of religion, the Protestant religion, was in his capital. So once he flipped to Protestantism, I was able to enforce religion on him and actually eliminate that center of Reformation. This war goes smoothly against Denmark, as you can see. I did ally Muscovy so that the previous war was much more plausible, and the Muscovites gave me an avenue in to Scandinavia. But at this stage, I already have a platform of Sweden to operate out of, so I'm not too worried about the fact that I also have quite some navy myself as well. I'm not too worried about Scandinavian supremacy. So you can see here, if you're paying attention, that I have not gone against Pomerania yet, but there is a little tag down the bottom where I am at war with Castile, and that is of course fighting over his throne. However, I did, because I was so sick of the Centre of Reformation converting one province minors, I actually declared on Pomerania here to do exactly what I just described a moment ago. And I'm actually just utilizing the length of war against Castile as he's having trouble walking through France. Primarily just sitting at war with him to actually separate peace Portugal with ease down the line. So the next center of Reformation has actually spawned in Ravensburg. Again, you could say that I was lucky. I did invest 5 imperial authority into revoking his free city status so that I could go in and enforce religion on him. And a few of his neighbors have converted to Protestantism, some of which I was also able to separate peace and enforce religion on, which is pretty nice. Now, ironically, down the line, guys, believe it or not, this is something I've never seen before. The third center of Reformation actually spawned in Pomerania again. As I had already enforced religion on him, he flipped Protestantism again to Protestant again, and the third center was in his land. Now, in this case, I was already rushing down my religious ideas, and once my truce was up, I was able to take the province this time, which was not his capital, and I did with quite some difficulty convert it, and ultimately, overall, smashing Protestantism. Feeling really good about that, and that is a part of the reason that this game is just so crazy if you do continue to watch and see at the end of this video. Now, I wanted to say a few things here. As you can see, I'm fighting Castile over his throne, but for those of you who do not know, it is really worth PUing Bohemia in the beginning of the game. I used to hold the mentality that getting the personal union over Bohemia is actually not key, because he will ultimately be inherited if you are going for the full HRE route, where you're really investing inside the empire. Then you're going to inherit all of Bohemia anyway. And although that is the case, I want to tell you guys a little bit of trivia, but it's also relevant. Many of you probably know that Bohemia is obviously an elector, and you can get his vote quite easily here. As he will be your subject, you can increase relations dramatically and acquire his vote. Many of you probably also know that once you actually inherit Bohemia, Austria will become an elector the same way as Bohemia was, because you inherit the Bohemian electorship. But what many of you might not know is that Bohemia is basically stuck in a state of duchy. He cannot increase his rank any higher, his government rank, than duchy. And Bohemia, of course, is a kingdom, and the reason is because he is not German. So any non-German, like a French nation or a Czech nation inside the empire, can actually become kingdom rank, because they're essentially not saying that they're king of Germany, but instead a king of the Czechs. Well, what many of you might not know is if you do inherit Bohemia, you can actually become kingdom rank, which of course is pretty significant, like giving you the states available, as of course the idea is that you are the emperor and the archbishop of, or archduke rather, wrong word, of Austria, but you are also the king of the Czechs. That is the idea, and you are able to unlock kingdom rank, and of course imperial rank will be locked until you form the HRE proper. But you can see here that I am fighting, or I am going to be going into Pomerania here shortly, doing a lot of actions also whilst at truce with nations, adding provinces and to the empire and building that imperial authority. But my truce is up with the French apparently, and I'm going into war with him once again with the same tactic. I did have fairly high aggressive expansion, and of course doing things such as taking the thrones of Castile, Aragon, and Naples aggressively does contribute massively to that aggressive expansion. So I'm not able to take as much as I would like of land from the French, but I am utilizing the same tactic, as you'll see here shortly, of releasing nations, hoping that they do in fact join the empire. Now, I'm sorry to say here that although that nation did join and it was well worth it, the Diplo points, this next nation, I don't regret having released them because it did give me access all the way down into Iberia with ease, but unfortunately they did not actually join the empire as I would have liked. But the good news is that even before I form the Holy Roman Empire or revoke, I am, I would say, officially stronger than France, and myself and my subjects combined can actually smash the French in an offensive war at this stage, which makes me feel awfully comfortable. I did feel like I had a lot on my plate. Keep in mind that this is over the course of only a few years, guys, dealing with the Protestant Reformation, etc. And unfortunately for that reason, I was not able to be so sort of proactive when it comes to dealing with the Poles. Oh, that's right. I remember now, guys, that I did declare on Mecklenburg in order to circumvent my truce with Pomerania, as he was allied to him. It resulted in a few enforcing religion, solidifying the Catholic faith here, but also taking that province. As you can see, it's called a Grieffield or something like that, I forget, where the third center of the Reformation actually spawned. And right now I'm trying to convert it. Thankfully, the +3 missionary strength that I have kind of counteracts the -5 that is on that province due to the center of religion being there. Now you can see that I have integrated Serbia, I've released Byzantium, and I'm going in for the reconquest against the Ottomans. And apparently somebody, whoever was the papal controller, actually called a crusade against them. So emboldening me that much more and allowing me to be successful in my second campaign and apparently crusade into the Ottoman Empire. Definitely an extremely cool game here, and I just want to say, guys, that I really think that this tactic, you can see there that I did inherit Bohemia as my emperor died. Unfortunately, I would have preferred to inherit a country outside of the empire already to be able to add it, but there you go. Now, before this time-lapse ends here, guys, I wanted to say one thing, that the tactic of taking Scandinavia via diplomacy, you can integrate them after 10 years, of course, because they are simply subjects. And I think that this is kind of revolutionary in terms of adding provinces to the empire. Unfortunately, I did end up needing to take a province from Denmark in order to bridge the gap over to Scandinavia, and that was quite awkward because he really managed to make stellar diplomacy, including France, Poland, and being guaranteed by Muscovy. But I did eventually, I think in my third war with France, actually pull that off, and that gave me the ability to add all of Sweden and Norway to the empire at that point, as I had integrated them both, and that resulted, in, of course, in probably about 50 provinces worth, or pretty damn close, resulting in essentially like a free reform. So although each nation took 200 Diplo, which is quite expensive to actually steal from Denmark, definitely worth it, and definitely should become a kind of mainstream tactic as the emperor, because it just gives you a tremendous amount of land to be added. With that being said, you can also see that I have finished off fleshing out Byzantium with his cores, and we're coming to an end here, the end here of this time lapse, and there is going to be a little bit of a jump in time, but I hope that you guys are impressed with the rest of this video, or as impressed as I was, because I really enjoyed this game. tremendously. In fact, I think it was probably the best game that I've ever played, without an exaggeration. Alright fam, so it is the year 1541, and as you can see, the Austrian border has dramatically expanded. We are going to check in here just before I end the episode, as Revoke is currently available by the year 1541, less than 100 years at the current state of my game. I am allied to Muscovy, but I just want to keep in mind that he did become an invalid rival, and I was able to re-ally him once he became an invalid rival. I have not been an ally to him the entire time, as he did rival me at one stage. Same thing with England, except that was a long time ago. But my diplomacy right now is extremely strong, as you can see. My allies, as well as the 4 personal unions that I have. So if we go ahead and look at the economic situation, you can see that I am currently losing money, and my manpower is very low. But I am having a +3 advisor here at half the price, a +2 advisor at not half the price, because I really wanted that Diplo rep, as I have been integrating nations back to back, but the Diplo rep is just so beneficial for us. So I am losing some money, but we're also so victorious so consistently that I take a lot of nations' money. Regardless, here you can see that as the Emperor I have 101 troops. So it is not exactly that we are poor, it is that I am funding so many troops. If we go ahead and look at our situation with temples, workshops, marketplaces, you can see that my country is extremely industrialized at this stage of the game, as well as shipyards. I'm over my naval force limit with 78, but obviously I intend for that to catch up here fairly quickly. And if we look at our economy, you can see 31 per month from tax, 25 from production, and 14 from trade, as well as 8.6 from gold. If we go ahead and look at the trade, you can see that I am the most influential nation within the English Channel, and both the English Channel, considering England and myself are both going to be collecting here, as well as my influence over it, is going to increase dramatically here as we go into the future, because I do somewhat plan on going colonial. But of course, these economic situations, the negative income rather, will be a thing of the past here, as I am about to revoke. If we look at our subjects prior, we can see that we have essentially 0 liberty desire, a grand total of 5 liberty desire from Castile. And let's go ahead and look at the religious map mode. You can see that there are no centers of religion remaining. However, I do have some Protestantism, and what I actually plan to do, guys, believe it or not, unfortunately, because Paradox did essentially nerf the Empire to where the occupation of Rome will happen, that means that we will get -1 Diplo reputation, which obviously outweighs the Diplo reputation from the Pope, as well as the fact that this -10 papal influence is going to make it difficult to get the reputation from the Pope. So what I actually intend to do, guys, believe it or not, is form the Empire and use this amount of Protestantism. I did it, guys. Achieved it. Is that the word? To actually allow my nation to flip to Protestant once I am the tag of the Holy Roman Empire. That is actually my plan, and then we will get the positive version of the occupation of Rome instead of the negative. So, with that being said, with no further ado, I'm going to go ahead and revoke. You can see that I have obtained every single vote, a grand total of 53, and we demand oaths of loyalty. Look at that empire. 53 different nations have now become my subject, and you can see here that we're gaining, in literally 2 months, we almost have 1 imperial authority. It is going to take no time at all to actually form the Holy Roman Empire, if that is our ambition. So we can see Savoy with 18 liberty desire, probably worth getting a royal marriage with him, as it does not take a slot, and that is all of our liberty desire by the looks of things. Nobody else has any qualms. We can see that Savoy is quite large here. Going to go ahead and grab a royal marriage, as it does not cost a slot. The Ottomans are no longer a valid rival. Get wrecked, mate. Or they don't consider us a rival. So, before the Poles become invalid, guys, we're going to go ahead and declare a war against them to embolden our power projection even further. And I wonder, guys, who do you think will win this war? Is it going to be the Polish Commonwealth or all of Europa combined? Let's go ahead and look at the force limit comparison. 330 infantry versus 54,000 infantry, 123,000 cavalry versus 17, and almost 40,000 cannons versus 13,000 cannons. Pretty close, I would say. But let's let the end of the month tick over. Now I am going to be a little bit laggy here, even on my sort of beast of a machine, because I'm also rendering a video while we do this. But yep, Ottomans are invalid rival. Now I would suspect that the Poles are invalid as well. It's just that I declared war on him in a cheeky manner, because it usually takes a month to adjust. If we go ahead and look at our economy, you can see now that I'm making, instead of -7 or 8, 28 ducats a month. Absolutely spectacular. Needless to say, guys, that I'll be taking a big chunk of Poland here, and life will be good as we go into the future here. Obviously going to be trying to get my reputation as high as possible. Right now we're sitting at 3.5. That's with the subjugation of the papacy, unfortunately, and the annexed subjects, both of which I intend to taper off and no longer have those modifiers, as well as unfortunately, my legitimacy is not in a good situation. However, my ruler is 445, and that's part of the reason that I have a ruler with bad legitimacy. But of course, the idea is to get my reputation extremely high, and resulting in, at the moment, we are actually under our Diplo slots, as you can see, so that is not an issue currently, and I plan to keep each Hungary, Naples, Aragon, and Castile as my unions, and not even bother to integrate them, quite frankly, because I suspect at some stage we will inherit them all, just like we have inherited Bohemia, as long as we focus on each modifier, which does enable you to inherit them. Can see here that we have a negative 11% chance of inheriting Hungary, which is the only one that can be integrated at this stage, so it's a good one to look at. But I know full well that if we have our stability at +3, you get 1 per stability, 1%, and our reputation, we can actually outweigh that negative size of country by getting our reputation up. The absolute dreamy game here, guys, and last of all, I'll just show the fact that I took defensive ideas, because actually, honestly, I wanted to keep my army tradition high, but it's also very economic. You could see that my economy was struggling, and that land maintenance modifier has helped us up until this point. But yeah, that's the end of this video, guys. As you can see, after we take out the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, I have really hindered France and the Ottomans. We have the Deus Volt CB, which we're going to be able to use on bloody well every nation, especially once we become Protestant, and my influence over Europe is absolutely supreme, and quite frankly, at this stage, guys, my influence over the entire world, I would say. So, rest assured that Austria is still the alpha of Europe, and in my opinion, one of, if not the most powerful nations in the game. Thank you very much for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed this video. I'm sorry that it dragged on and was very long, but nonetheless, I hope you guys enjoyed if you're watching this point.